My name is Alan Zimkus. My rank was ETN2, Electronics Technician Communications E5 on board a USS Hubris. Well, Vietnam started. We knew what was happening over there as a teenager. We knew that there were a lot of people getting, unfortunately, killed or wounded severely. And so my thoughts were, well, if I had to go in and I was going to be drafted, I think I'd rather volunteer for something I wanted to go into for something I didn't want to go into, i.e., the Army or the Marine Corps. And there were some people from our high school that did go into the military right after high school. And the first one, he was a friend of mine, name was Bruce Shapak. He was only maybe just turned 18 and he died in Vietnam. And so that made me double down on, okay, if I'm going to get drafted, um, I'm going to the Navy. And so when my number came up and I physically qualified for the military, I joined the Navy. My father was in the Navy, and back in 1966, I was going to college out in Oklahoma and probably had more fun than actually studying. And my number came up for the draft. And so I figured, do I want to get drafted or do I want to follow my father's footsteps? So I joined. Under the buddy program the Navy offered at that time. Ironically, my buddy went to San Diego for basic training, and I went to Great Lakes, Illinois for basic training. That was the last time I saw my buddy who would be $20, which was a lot of money back in those days. We did basic training during the winter time up in Illinois. It was cold. In fact, it was so cold one time. I grew up in Connecticut and it did snow like it did in Illinois. But the difference was I never heard snow squeak. The reason being, it got to be 20 below zero. And snow has a different texture at 20 below than it does in Connecticut, where it's mainly moist. So I did write home to my parents and said, wow, the snow squeaks up here. So it was a long winter in basic training. Finally finished. And then I qualified to go to uh, electronics technician school, also in Great Lakes, and went through electronics school there. I don't remember how long it was, probably 3 months, 4 months, and became an ET based for communications. And after that, my first place of duty was directly on the USS Purvis DD-709 out of Newport Island, which was only an hour and a half from my house in Connecticut. So it was not too bad. Um, and I came on board, and it was different than being in your barracks when you're up there and basic training and in A school. Um, we all basically slept in very small compartments. And I learned very quickly I wanted to be in the top rack, not the bottom rack, because some of the guys, as you know, in the Navy and other services, they have a tendency to maybe overindulge sometimes on liberty. And so it's always better to be on top than be on the bottom. So I learned that very quickly the first few weeks. So I got the top rack when it first came available, and that's where I stayed for the next until I was on that particular ship the whole time. From the time from the day I boarded to the day I left service, about 3 years later, I was on that one ship, the USS Purvis DD-709 out of Newport. When I first up and looked up and saw, well, being an electronics technician, you had to climb the mast in case something failed. And I'm thinking, that's a long way up there. And I only had to do it one time, undersea, underway, when one of the antennas, probably there was a connection actually failed. And so we had to get it fixed. And since at that time I was the youngest ET on board in regards to rank, guess who went up? I did. That was not really a fun experience. I don't fear heights. I had a hot air balloon for 25 years and had no fear of heights, which I did. But that was not a really great experience underway when the ship was swaying to be up there way up. If it worked, we didn't have to do much else. If it didn't work, you worked on it until it worked, which meant you might work 24/7 to get it working. Okay. Unlike other ratings, um, our only duty was to maintain, in my case, communications equipment running. Receivers, transceivers, they had to run. Of course, there was always backups, but sometimes the backups failed. So that was our goal. That was our mission. We had to keep things running. Um, there was seemed like there was never a sufficient amount of parts on board a destroyer, which is very, very small compared to an aircraft carrier. So sometimes if we didn't have the right board, we would have to go down to troubleshoot the board. And in those days, it was basically resistors and things before. It was tubes and resistors, and it was not plug and play like it is today. So we would have to go down and troubleshoot the board to find something wrong with it and hopefully get it fixed. If it didn't get fixed, then we would hopefully the supply ship, if we were underway, would supply us with the next time we got to a port. But that was really our only duty, unlike some of the others that their duty might be, maintaining certain things, and so they spit polished and painted, and everything is looking nice. We didn't have to spit polish transmitters and receivers; they just have to work. So that was a good plane. So we had probably more downtime than some, but when something failed, we had no downtime. Well, it seems like every time you did on your first cruise, they would feed you the worst stuff. Like, okay, we're going to have liver and onions. We're taking off tonight for a cruise. Really? Liver and onions? I can't even stand the smell today. Um, Probably the Navy, though, is better than the guys living in a foxhole in the frontline combat, living out of cans and K rations and whatever, come up with coal. Maybe they were able to get it hot. They could heat it up with their cigarette lighter or something. So yeah, the food was not glamorous. It was satisfying. There's always something to eat every day. Maybe it's not something you wanted to eat every day, but they served. There was always plenty of it. So I sure would not. I like to cook myself personally, but I'm sure I wasn't glad I was not a cook on board a ship doing it for 274 people every single day. That would be above and beyond my call of duty. When we first left Newport, Rhode Island, we went over to New Jersey. Can't remember the ammunition base over there to New Jersey. We on the way over, we stopped at Norfolk, Virginia. Never was stationed in Norfolk. Lived in Virginia after the Navy. Had gone there, but I've only been to Norfolk like 2 times for 1 or 2 nights, whereby a lot of people were stationed there for many, many years. Um, and then while we were overseas, we were supplied by ammunition ships. Again, being the rate that I was in electronics, I was never involved in the actual transfer of ammunition or oil or supplies from supply ship to the destroyer. But I had time to take a lot of photos of them doing that. So, which was interesting. I mean, those guys, some of them lived on the edge because it wasn't an easy thing to do to get 2 ships in actual sync and then fire the lines over and bring the lines back and forth, just have a heavy enough line so they're able to bring over munitions and oil and everything over. So that was never my responsibility. But that's where you used to get it. And when we went back a couple of times while we were over in Nam, we would stop at other places. Like we would go back to Subic Bay. We picked up ammunition in Subic Bay. Um, and I believe that was the only other location because Japan would not allow us to bring in arms there. We went to Japan, not China, Japan, Sasebo, Japan, but not to rearm at all, just for liberty. We, Japanese at that time, they were more receptive to us on a World War II destroyer versus the same time there was a nuclear submarine coming into Sasebo, Japan. They were not receptive to them uh, because they were nuclear. And obviously in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they left them, I would imagine, bad feelings in their mind about anything nuclear coming into their country. We would go over, and many times, sometimes we would be in uniform. A few times we'd be in civilian clothes, and we never had any problems. We'd go to different places. There'd be Pizza Hut, amazing enough. There'd be a Pizza Hut over there nearby where the base was and other places. We go to different areas and try some of their food and whatever. But we never had any interaction with people that would be uh, harmful to them or harmful to us. They were somewhat receptive. They knew we weren't one of them, obviously. They weren't, there was not a lot of people speaking English back then, back in the early, well, mid 60s in Japan. I imagine today there would be, but back then, this was before we all knew about Sony over here and Toyota and all the rest of it. But the people were pleasant. They would allow us to take pictures, everything else. So I thought it was a good time. I hadn't gone to Hong Kong when I was in the Navy. It was one of our places we stayed for a few days. Got a custom-made suit for $99 or whatever it was back then. I don't remember the actual price, but a day later, whoop, got a custom-made suit. Combat was totally different. We worked port and starboard, 12 on, 12 off, and we were over in Nam. We're basically in Vietnam, a gun show. We would stay offshore, and we would, based on the needs of the Marines, the Army, whoever needed us, they needed close fire support. We would then give them close fire support. And when you're working 12 on and 12 off, my shift usually on, because by that time I was an E5 going to Nam, and so I was more of a senior. So my daytime was basically the time that I worked. But at nighttime, our crew quarters, were next to the aft twin 5-inch gun mounts, and sometimes they would fire all night long. And you're only maybe here to 15 feet away from the hatch where the men went in, the fire control people went in to fire the guns. But we got to be so tired that you would sleep through it. You were just exhausted. Working 12 hours, 12 on, 12 off every single day, 7 days a week, sometimes for 3 weeks, 4 weeks before you went on liberty again. So that experience was totally different than just being under a routine cruise. Routine cruise, you get up, reveille. You maybe didn't want to, but you did. You get up, take a shower, go to the mess hall, have something to eat. Uh, they would usually have quarters where they did an inspection, and then we'd go back to our ET shack, electronics technician shack, and see what might have to be done that day, if anything. Of course, there's always a fresh pot of coffee boiling in there, which was better than the coffee that they had on the mess decks. Reason being, because of the mess decks, we had those 5-gallon cans of coffee, and if they weren't drained to the bottom, they wouldn't do a new pot. And sometimes that coffee would be there for days. Not days, but it seemed like days. And it got to be very strong. And the funny thing is, after I got out of the Navy, I never drank coffee again. I'm a tea drinker. So and then and so underway or in you're in port and Newport. it is totally different. It's more like a job. You work from 8 to 5 and had liberty or went home, depending on some people if they lived nearby. Some were married. I wasn't. I was single at that time. So it was more routine, almost like a job. And then every once in a while, we went on training cruises. During that period of time out of Newport. But it became, challenging, but also in some cases, it was probably a little boring sometimes because it was so routine until something broke that it was not routine. Well, we all had heard about the experience and we all said, okay, we got to do this. And when the day came, it was crossing the equator. I still have my certificate in my office at home. Um, can't tell exact place where the crater was, where we crossed, but it was out in the Western Pacific. And all hands on deck who were shellback or polywogs, because the shellbacks were the ones who had crossed prior to that. And we had the uh, King Neptune there with his crown and grow robes and his trident. And then we had his queen, or we had one of the guys on ship who was a shellback, who was the heaviest guy on board. And I think he was the royal baby. And all I remember is that the king gave us basically said, okay, whatever, you got to go through the ceremony and all this stuff. And the first thing was the baby, they used to pour, he had his shirt off. He had a very big stomach. And they put all types of condiments, mustard, diesel fuel, all this disgusting stuff on a stomach, and they would rub your faces in it. And then you started the ceremony where you went through the 20 or 30-foot long canvas chute that was filled with garbage and all types of other nasty stuff. And while you're going to their chute, they're hitting you on the outside of the canvas chute with canvas parts of hoses on the butt. And all you had on was your skivvies backwards. Backwards, yeah. And so you come out of that, and they put you into a coffin to wash you off. So they close the coffin, turn on a fire hose to wash you off of all the crud and everything else that you had on. Then you went to the royal barber, got a haircut, and then it was over. Thank God. And I did catch a lot of pictures. I had bought a new camera on my way over to Vietnam, and I used to take a lot of cameras. So I took a lot of photos of a lot of these guys here tonight going to the ceremony. Now there was one person on board ship, not in our particular division, but one person who was very fearful of going on, and he apparently locked himself up inside of a hatch into a room someplace. I don't remember where. And they sent up the welders to cut open the hatch to get the guy out to make him go through it, and he got it the worst. And actually, the officers got pretty bad too. The ones that were still polywogs, not shellbacks, they didn't have any break. They went through the same stuff we did. So it was fun. Got a lot of memories in color of the experience. Yeah, C.W. Taylor, Commander, C.W. I remember him during battle stations, during Nam, being that all the electronics were up in the bridge area, radio room, transmitters, radar room. Some of the ETs were radar. I was in communications. We would always be up in and around the bridge. And I been on one time, ourselves and another destroyer. I can't remember the name of the other destroyer. We were in an operation off of Gulf of Tonkin in an area off of an island called Honmat Island. It was held by the NVA, North Vietnamese Army. And the two destroyers were going at basically flank speed 32, 33 knots to go by this island to draw fire so that the USS New Jersey battleship, which was 20 miles offshore, which you cannot see, they were able to find the positions of the guns that were situated in the sides of this cliff. And so while we're being fired upon, I was up in the bridge area at that time, this is the first time our captain was in actual combat. And he was happy. He was jumping up and down like a little kid. That he was in combat. This is what he trained for. This is why he was there. And I still remember that. Okay, he's having fun. We're not. We're getting fired at. And there were shells off our bow. Well, they were coming. They didn't hit us, but we can feel and hear the shots. And then on the New Jersey, well situated 20 miles off, they were not going to be hit by anybody. They started firing in their 16-inch guns, and each shell weighs 2,000 pounds. I think the weight of a Volkswagen back in those days. Took 400 pounds of gunpowder to fire one shell, and they just started hammering in on that particular gun positions on that island for a few hours. We never have to worry about that place again. That's why we have the combat action ribbon. That's why we have other things that our ship was awarded, battle efficiency award, and others because of our combat situations. My general quarter station was up on the bridge area because that's where all the transmitters, radar room was at, the radar room was at, the sonar, everything was up there in the bridge area. So that's where something would fail, it would not be failing below decks, it'd be failing up there. So that's where I was stationed. There was a couple of times that we had some trawlers, and I took photos of them from our ship. That sort of would maybe be off a mile or two, and follow us. I don't know if they were Chinese at that time or too far away really to tell. They weren't flying flags, but we knew that they were not one of us. But they were in international waters. They were able to do what they want, be out there. But that was the only interaction with any other type of adversary. When we got back from Vietnam, we got back via, let's see, Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, Pago Pago, a couple other places. But when I got back, I was supposed to be discharged after being on board the ship for over 3 years. I was almost 4 years out in the Navy at that time. But they could not find another person in my rating to go on to another Gitmo cruise in a couple weeks after most of the sailors had gotten off. A lot of them were seniors. They got off. They discharged. They held me because they couldn't fill my billet. So I had to, for my last basically 2 months and 22 days, above and beyond my 4 years of duty. It's amazing how well I know exactly how long I stayed in. Had to go back to Guantanamo Bay for another training cruise after being there 2 other times. It's not what you want to do in your last 2 months and 22 days of service. So it wasn't fun by any means. It's like, we're going back to this hot area, humid area, playing war games. I just got out of war, so I wasn't really enthused about the whole thing. Everyone has different things. Training session for us would be maybe a fire in the radio room, or maybe a fire in the transmission room, or the transmitter room, where we'd have to go in and with extinguishers and the rest of it, and make simulations. Go into general quarters time after time after time again to improve your times of getting maybe awakened out of bed in the middle of the night and get up to your general quarters in a matter of who knows how long it used to take. Maybe a minute, 2 minutes, time to jump into your clothes or whatever clothes you were able to get on in a period of time and run up to your battle stations. So it was training was not a lot of fun, especially after doing it time and time and time again from basic training. There's a reason for training, obviously, to keep on top of things. But when you know that when you're short and you're doing it for the last time, it's not as much fun as it would have been the first time. So, they kept you on your toes. I mean, everyone, obviously, every single person on board the ship, from the captain to the guys working in the machine rooms, the engine rooms, they all have different things that they did. The ones that are working the guns and the depth charges, or everything has so many different responsibility. But we're very focused on what we did. Well, I went in the Navy as a kid, 21-year-old, and obviously you learn a lot. You come out more of a man. Uh, you learn to say yes, sir. You can't say no sometimes. It's a different feeling. It leaves you with a good feeling. We did join the Navy, see the world. Well, I know some of the people I know in the Navy really didn't see much of the world. They stayed in the United States. They went to San Diego. They really stayed on there the whole time. But we did get to see Australia and New Zealand and Hawaii and Hong Kong and Taiwan and Japan and you know bunches of places in Panama and everything else. So I didn't see all the world, but I saw the western half of the world, and it was very exciting. When I got back from getting discharged, I moved back to Connecticut, and initially I worked for my father. My father had a tool and die company in Orange, Connecticut. Most of the work, he had about 50 guys working for him, and most of the work he did was all precision model work for the Sikorsky, Pratt Whitney, Norden. They did precision model work that the production workers would then use their examples as the perfect piece to take all their measurements off of. But working for your father's difficult. And after doing that for about a year and living at home, I realized, this is not what I want to do anymore. Dad and I had different thoughts about doing things in life. And so I went into, at that time, um, sales. I started with a company called SCM, Smith Corona, very well known back in the 60s, not so well known today. And I was in their copier products division. I sold copiers and became very good at it. I worked up from initially just a salesperson. And what they did initially, they gave two of us, two people, two new recruits, if you want to call it, in sales, and say, this is your territory. Whoever sells the most in 90 days keeps the job. Okay. And that's what we did. And in those days, we would actually take a small photocopier out. We put it on a cart. We put it into a car supplied station wagon that the company gave us. And we would go into downtown New Haven and other cities, go into a large building, go to the top floor, and start coming down and knocking on doors and say, hi, my name is Alan Zimkus from SCM. Can I talk to someone about your photocopying needs? And that's how it started. And so after that, I became the sales supervisor of New Haven. Then I went to become the sales manager in Miami, Florida. Then I became the regional sales manager up in the Indiana area. And went with copiers until one day they said basically, well, we're closing the division down. And I was 6 months away from getting vested, 9.5 years with the company, 6 more months before I was able to get some type of remuneration from doing all that work. And they basically shut the whole division down. But I stayed in sales and went in to sell word processing equipment for CPT word processing at that time. Competed with Xerox, Wang, and others, linear in those days. So my whole life started basically in sales, and eventually I started my own business in sales, selling software to copier dealers. throughout the eastern part of the United States, and it worked out well. Now we're here at a reunion um, of the Hugh Purvis here in Annapolis this year, and there's 70 guys here or whatever. But the ones you really know are the ones you worked and lived with, played with, went on liberty with every single day for all that period of time, you know? And the ones you were in combat with, and there's a few of them here, at the same time, you got even closer to them versus the ones that might have been there before you went to combat. They got off, well, you knew who they were. You went to Liberty, you drank some beer with them, you had a good time, but you don't remember them the same way as the ones that you were in combat with, day in and day out. Because, you've been there together, you think, well, this might be the last day together. It's a different thought process entirely. Obviously, we were superior in power. Um, the NVA didn't really have an air force per se. Everything was ground troops, VetCon, ground. I felt sorry for obviously the guys that were on the ground, the Marines, the Army, and others who were there. Even on the Air Force bases that were under attack, on the ground. We had it a little differently. We weren't being fired upon day in and day out, but we were fired upon, and we also not fired upon also, but we were also fired at them day in day out. And as I said earlier, when you're doing port and starboard 12 on and 12 off, and you're off hours for 12 hours, you're shooting guns all night long, it doesn't make for great sleeping. But you get so exhausted that after a while you just learn to, okay, I'm working another 11 hours and 55 minutes, and I go to bed and hear some gunshots for a while, then you fall asleep. Hugh Purvis was, I understand, a private in the Marines. He was a Medal of Honor winner. And this Wednesday, when we visit the Naval Academy Museum, there is a memorial there of Medal of Honor winners. And he will be there in this history museum. After leaving the museum, we have some of his family joining us. Obviously, not him personally, but I think his grandsons or great grandsons, they will be joining us for a memorial service after. But we'll be doing a memorial service with uh, the great grandkids of the original Medal of Honor winner. So it should be quite exciting.